Thank you. For SND, Seb Dance.
Thank you. Sorry, another question from behind. I want to return to the Commission's paper on the SDGs and the scenarios that were outlined. I think it's unthinkable that any scenario other than scenario 1 would deliver us the results and get us to the place that we need to be in. What would you say we can do to get member states to individually meet their SDG targets? Will there be any binding SDG implementation that you foresee at an EU level? How would that work? And thinking in particular, you mentioned the biodiversity conference in China, an SDG 15 on biodiversity. What would a headline ambition look like for biodiversity at a global level?
First of all, it's interesting to see how quickly the thinking about the SDGs has evolved. I remember the difficulties I had to get this document done in the Commission and even to get the 3 scenarios in. But now, nobody seems to be talking about anything else but the first scenario, which I welcome very much. Concretely, on your question, I believe that, well, there's so much commitment to the SDGs in the member states, that it's time that the Commission would ask, what does this mean concretely? What are you going to do concretely to implement these 17 SDGs, and how are you going to do it? What is, in the different areas, your plan? And I believe that if we want to be successful in the next conferences, whether it's already in Chile and in Glasgow and in China in October next year, we have to start becoming more concrete on these issues. And especially the problem with biodiversity, and there, you know, I've asked some scientific advice, and I said it again 2 weeks ago in New York. The problem is, what is your benchmark? How do you quantify? With emissions, it's easy, relatively easy. But with biodiversity, it's scientifically far more complicated. And what I want to do is to engage with the scientific community to make sure that we're able to find some benchmarks we can then devise our policies upon. And I think we need to do this before we go to Beijing.
Thank you. Yes, I'm pleased you said that, because I think one of the reasons we're missing current biodiversity targets is because we don't have that tangible goal. Would you say that in terms of a domestic agenda, in terms of the Union, that giving DG Klima more of a say over the first pillar of the CAP would be a sensible way of ensuring that we in the EU, notwithstanding that we don't know what that headline goal will be, that we in the EU meet our diversity targets?
I think it would be sensible to, as a Commission, to discuss the division between what we put in the first pillar and the second pillar. And I believe if you look at the difference in numbers, if you really want European agriculture to move in the direction we want it to move, the second pillar should have more room to maneuver than we have now in the first pillar. So I would like to have a discussion about the correspondence between the 2 pillars, and if we could not create a situation where we help the agricultural sector to make these structural changes through an increased possibility for the second pillar.